Hello, good to see you guys again, my hardworking and good-looking students. So let's take a look now. We are moving on, and we are on 1.3. So you're on 1.3 of our vocab terms, and this test is going to be coming up pretty soon. So let's get ready for that. All right, we are looking at our first term, which is civilization. Well, I cheated here. I put the dictionary.com definition there. All right, I kind of like this first one up here we got. An advanced state of human society in which a high level of culture, science, industry, and government has been reached. Really, when we're looking at a civilization, we are looking at settled people for the most part, and we are looking at governments that have been instituted. We are looking at literature. There are myths. Often, almost all the time in history, there is a religion that is established. Culture, language that one group of people have that make them different than anyone else. So it makes them different than other civilizations. They have a law, they have a government. A civilization could be a city, like a city-state. It could be a huge-ass empire. It could be a country. These are what civilizations are. So oftentimes, I looked up Civilization 2 and I found, oh yeah, this game called Civilization, where you're trying to build your own civilization. And if that helps you out a lot, that can be one way to think about it. You're trying to build your own government, you have your own art, you have your own music. Yeah, and sometimes you attack other civilizations and take them over. So anyway, that is a civilization. And when we look at civilizations, we have our Neolithic river civilizations are our first ones that we know about in human history. The ones on the Tigris and Euphrates, Mesopotamia, and the Andes with Chavin over here, the Indus Valley with Harappa, one of my favorites, where they actually had plumbing, which was really cool. Yeah, running water here. They didn't make weapons, but they had running water, so pretty cool. There's the Yellow River, Huanghe. This is the China one. This will be on AP World History. Kind of a big deal, like a huge-ass big deal. China is very, very important. Nile River, Egypt, Papua New Guinea, Mesoamerica. These are the early civilizations, which will eventually spread until what we have today. So they're very significant because we're pretty much going to be studying civilizations throughout all of AP World History. Our next word is state, and it actually kind of goes nicely with civilization. State is basically where you have a government, but it has a territory. So here I wrote borders here. So when you think of state, you want to think of borders. A state pretty much is a territory. It has borders where it ends and where other states or other areas begin, or just the state ends and there's nomadic people. But a state is pretty much a territory that has one government or people that are in control of it. So don't just think of state like, Minnesota, although Minnesota does have borders and a government. A state could be an empire. A state could be a city-state, just where one city has its own government and it's its own little, like, micro-country, one city. Could be a huge-ass empire, could be a country, could be an actual state, like Minnesota. But a state is an area that has a government, and it has borders where those laws and where that government rules. That is what a state is. They will exist throughout history from our first civilizations, where states will get territory, which makes them different than pastoral people or hunters and gatherers. And the trend will be, we'll see in this map, is states will get bigger and they'll cover almost all of the world. That's why they're significant. We will be studying a lot of states and the territory they take. Hierarchical society. A hierarchy or hierarchical society is a society that has different levels. People who are on top, people who are on the bottom. Remember, when we were hunters and gatherers a long time ago, we were pretty much an egalitarian society. We were pretty equal. There wasn't much difference between the person in charge and the person in the bottom. That changes once we go through the Neolithic Revolution and we start forming our civilizations and states. Many of the states have governments that are in power, and they have a hierarchy, and they have people who have lots of power in them. Let's take a look here. Here's an image that we'll be looking at again with Egypt, where we have the pharaoh on top, the vizier, who are like the advisors, the nobles, the priests, the scribes, the soldiers, the craftsmen, the farmers, and the workers and slaves are all mostly down here. So this would be Egypt, for example, and we will see that there's a hierarchy. There's a person on top and a person on the bottom. And it's really easy to think about this for Egypt because it's a pyramid, the person on top, and there were pyramids in Egypt. And it's also interesting to think about that because who were in the pyramids? Dead kings, pharaohs. They had so much power that they would have a big, huge-ass pyramid built to them to remember their death. But it's not just Egypt. Other societies had pyramids in them or people on the top. Hierarchies are pretty common. Workplaces often have hierarchies, the boss or a person underneath them. Even in Cristo Rey, there's a hierarchy, all the way from the president, Mr. Myers of the school, to teachers, to you guys. There is a hierarchy in this school. So a hierarchical society means people on the top, people on the bottom. They will exist in almost all civilizations. Once we stop being hunters and gatherers, go through the Neolithic Revolution, we will establish hierarchies that pretty much exist all the way up until civilizations today. Empires. Empires are large civilizations or large states that take up lots of land. We have an example here of the Roman Empire, which will become very huge. There are many smaller empires in the time we're going to study about too, like the Hittites, for example. The Assyrians are early empires. What makes an empire is that they take over more than their land and they start having more than one culture. You're not just ruling your people who started the farming in the city-state. You start ruling over other people and the neighbors around you, and empires will expand. This is very significant because we'll see in history that empires continue to expand and get larger pretty much until about the 1800s, where we see that kind of start stopping. But empires will play a huge role in most of civilization. As empires will continue to grow, they'll get large. We will see when we get to Era 2, China, Rome, we'll see India. We'll see empires continue to grow. The Mongols get the largest empire in human history. The British have a huge empire. So empires are when you have your laws and your rules and you establish them over other people. Well, let's talk about one of these early empires. They were in an area called Anatolia. Today we would call that Turkey. If you want to see where it is in the map, that's right in this area right here. And that would be the Hittites. You see them right over there too. The Hittites form an early empire. And the Hittites are famous for their iron-making technology, making better weapons than other people, and then being able to kick their ass and take over. That's what the Hittites are known for. They're known for making their chariots, they're known for their weapons, and they're known for taking people over. And this leads to other civilizations like Egypt and other areas to get better metal technology, which diffuses, that means spreads, and goes to other people. And we see an increase in fighting technology, and more empires will come because of people like the Hittites. Here we see a ziggurat. Ziggurats were in Mesopotamia, also known as Samaria. So you see this one right here, this light blue, right here, this red area, my bad. This is the Tigris-Euphrates, Mesopotamia, this area right here. This is where Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, was. And in their city-states, so they first formed city-states, they would build a ziggurat, which was a religious building, also a political building. And at first, the priests of Mesopotamia had a ton of power. And the priests in Mesopotamia, they would go into ziggurats, and this would be where they would be able to communicate with the gods. Now, the priests would continue to have a lot of power until eventually these military generals kind of like came in and slowly took the power from the priests away. But a ziggurat is like a big, almost like a temple, but also a political center that existed in ancient Samaria, and it was the centerpiece of their city-state. So that would be in the center. It showed the hierarchical structure, how the priests had more power, and eventually how the war generals in Samaria had more power. Our next word, number 7, is cuneiform. Cuneiform is the earliest form of writing that we know in world history. Cuneiform originated in Samaria, or Mesopotamia. It was written, you would take a clay tablet that was soft, and you would put in basically your symbols. Each symbol meant a different word. You would put that in there, and then they would heat it up, and you'd have a tablet where you could have writing. Why did they first start writing? They wanted to keep track of things like grain, how much food they had, could they feed the people. And they eventually developed the whole system of writing. Cuneiform was the first. It's followed later by hieroglyphics, we'll talk about next. It was used to keep track of grain. Also, Gilgamesh, which is a very important early book which tells us a lot about early Mesopotamian society, was written in cuneiform. So were the laws of Hammurabi. So cuneiform was the first writing that we know about. It was originally for grain, keeping track of things, but eventually was used for stories and even laws. Why is it significant? Writing will spread everywhere, as you know from studying world history, all the reading and writing you have to do. This will spread all over the world, but it's been first independently invented in Samaria and then spread to other areas. And here we have hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics, this looks like cuneiform. Well, it does. It's a similar writing system. Cuneiform was in ancient Egypt. So cuneiform was in ancient Egypt, also uses symbols. Each symbol means a word. If we look at our early civilizations, cuneiform started here, and hieroglyphics started in Egypt. They also wrote all their laws, their rules, and books were written in cuneiform, just like it was in Samaria. So, cuneiform is to Samaria in Mesopotamia. Hieroglyphics is to Egypt. Now, did the Egyptians invent this writing? Some historians think so. Some historians think that the Egyptians were trading and saw cuneiform and then go, ooh, that's a good idea, way to keep track of things, and they invented their own writing off it. We don't know if it diffused there or if they invented it. But hieroglyphics was in Egypt, and it was their early form of writing with symbols, had their laws on it, and also their books like the Book of the Dead was written in hieroglyphics. The Code of Hammurabi was one of the earliest law codes ever written that we have. In fact, it may be the oldest. It may be the oldest law code ever written. It is from ancient Samaria, and it was by the King Hammurabi, the Emperor Hammurabi. His in Babylon, actually, it was the Babylonian Empire when it was made. And Babylon was in Samaria or Mesopotamia. Now, Hammurabi's laws included a lot of laws, and a lot of them were like, if you would do something, your hand would be cut off, or you'd be thrown in the river. We'll look at a few examples of Hammurabi's laws, but it's the earliest laws. They were in Mesopotamia. Very historically significant, because laws will obviously spread all over the world. These were in Samaria. We again see it right there. And these were the earliest laws, were Hammurabi's Code of Laws. All right, the Vedas. The Vedas can be found in, today we associate them with India, and we take them especially with the foundation of the religion of Hinduism. A little bit of controversy when they were written. Many historians think that as the Aryan migration came into India, that the Vedas came with them. They're from the people who came in the Aryan migration. Here we see a map of the Aryan migration when they came into India. We know the Vedas didn't exist in Harappa, or the earliest Indian societies. They do come in a little bit later. That's one of the reasons why that's believed. But the Vedas are seen as basically foundation of Hinduism, which we'll be studying a little more in the next chapter. But they are an ancient text, ancient writing that existed in India. We'll talk more about those in a later chapter. The Upanishads are written towards the end of what's called the Vedic Era. The Vedic Era means like when the Vedas were written. And these again will be like a lot of the foundation of what will become Hinduism, which will exist in India. So the Vedas were like a lot of, a huge amount of all these readings, the foundations of Hinduism. The Upanishads were kind of written at the end of the Vedic age and serve as a foundation of what will become Hinduism. And we'll talk a little more about the Upanishads a little bit later in our next era on Hinduism. Hebrew monotheism. Hebrew monotheism, the ancient Hebrews are the ancestors of Jewish people and what will become the Jewish religion. Hebrew monotheism was different and very significant because they believed in one God. Not many gods, because most societies were polytheistic. Polytheistic means you believe in more than one God. You might have thousands of gods. In Egypt, for example, there were thousands of gods. In Mesopotamia, there were thousands of gods. Hebrews believed in one God, and this will be very significant to be the foundation of Judaism, Christianity, and even later Islam, which would be very significant in the future. We're going to go to our next video, so go to the next video after this.